One. Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. I am Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Mike, how you doing this weekend, sir?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good, Reed. How about you?
Doing good. Good weekend at the movies. Got a chance to go check out Deadpool and Wolverine with my son. It was a lot of fun. And we have a good comic to review. A new comic that was really anticipated for you and I. Flash Gordon #1, launching from Mad Cave Comics. And we kind of wondered, would this be the next great indie comic for you and I to get invested in? And that one of the interesting things, Free Comic Book Day 2 years ago, Conan launched kind of a zero issue that built up some anticipation for the upcoming series at Titan Comics at that time, and that has delivered and been our favorite comic essentially since launch. This
Yep.
year, 2024, we got Free Comic Day, Flash Gordon. Found out Jeremy Adams, one of our favorite writers who did such a great run on Flash and revitalizing Wally West, was going to be on the book along with Will Conrad on art. And again, it was one of the things we highlighted this in the Free Comic Book Day video we did. We really loved this comic. It was a 20-page, kind of fully illustrated
It was
story.
a full
Uh,
comic. I mean, look at that centerfold, that double page spread.
yeah, no,
The
they
art.
really went full bore at the Free Comic Day. They did a lot of smart things in that. They put the release of the first issue. They kind of gave you some details on what they were looking for. So you and I were both looking forward to this comic as it launched. Finally got an opportunity. Finally came out. I will say, very tough to find for some folks. I have this on my sub list, which is the only reason I was able to grab a copy of it. The store that I go to sold out of these. I believe the store that I occasionally visit as well. When I went to the movie theaters, took my kid after seeing Deadpool and Wolverine, they were out of it as well. So it seems like it's moving, especially for a smaller publisher, pretty well. But what we thought we'd talk about is just do a little bit of review, talk about our overall thoughts on the book. Mike, I know you have been a Flash Gordon fan for a bit. You've had some older comics that I know I've seen that you've had for years that used to kind of show off. So for you, how did Flash Gordon #1 hit you with how you feel about the character and everything?
I like it. I really, really like it. It's a great story. His motivation, of course, as always, is Dale Arden. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. Any story where Flash Gordon has to save Dale Arden is a good Flash Gordon story. And
Mhm.
the art is just amazing. And you can't you just can't say enough about, especially an old Flash Gordon fan. I mean, look at they even put in the cover for #2.
Yep.
uh yeah, Flash Gordon wields an axe. He could wield a laser gun, a sword, or an axe, equally as well. He's just a great iconic hero, right? From the dawn of the comic strip era. And his creator, Alex Raymond, was just at the forefront, creating these pulp hero characters that became legends and icons, like the Phantom and Flash Gordon and Tarzan. But Flash Gordon, maybe as much as Tarzan, has stood the test of time. I mean, and he went from comic strips in the newspaper right into, like, here's a late golden age Flash Gordon. Like, look at that painted cover.
Yeah.
I mean,
No, a
it's
lot of
just
great.
amazing. Anytime you get a guy in space trying to save a girl, I'm all in. I'm like, that's great stuff,
Just
right?
classic, simple storytelling.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
you no, he,
He's
he
trying
has
to
such a great comic legacy. Yeah, obviously. I mean, what the Detective 27 cover was largely a swap, a steal
a
by
swipe.
Bob
Yeah,
Kane. Yeah.
right. Just trace over those old Alex Raymond comic strips. You can't go wrong, Bob. And just make sure you meet that deadline for the next issue 27. And but he had a great run, and he went. He's gone through the publishers. Like, this was Dell, right?
Mhm.
Then King Features picked him up. These are some from the '60s. King Feature. some great classic covers. Oh wait, let me show you the number one with Al Williamson art.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
there's some great classic kind of
and oh wait,
comic art back there.
number two with Gil Kane art. Like they
Yeah,
could swap artists from issue to issue, but these artists were heavy hitters, right? And then he went to Gold Key for a while. What's better than saving the world? Well, you could have him fighting a dinosaur, maybe, and then this
a
great,
princess in space while fighting a dinosaur.
yeah,
That is the kind of storytelling that comics
this were
are
made
made for.
for, right? They were just made for. Here is a classic cover of him with Dale, and just great, great stuff, right? Oh, and this one is reminiscent of our current storyline, right?
Yeah. No,
So
I think it's so cool when you see a character like this who's been around for so long, and but is largely forgotten in today's age of comic books. And that I'll be honest, as a kid who was born in the late '80s, Flash Gordon, I caught, I think, once or twice on like Sci-Fi Channel, the old kind of '80s or '70s movie, whatever it was, I think '70s movie that was there. Obviously with all the camp and fun that was, and but it's largely a character who's kind of disappeared out of the overall kind of cultural lexicon. And so it's really interesting to see him get a launch. And what I think is great is in this day of modern comics that we have, where I think there's way too much focus on trying to ground the comics in the world that we live in now. I think what's great about stuff like Flash Gordon and why this comic stood out to me, it's very similar to Conan, in my opinion, where it's like, we're not trying to write a book that relates to your life in 2024. This is a sci-fi adventure. We want you to go. It's on a different planet with this crazy character. It's like it's very simplistic storytelling, but that's the whole point of comics: is the escapism, is the ability to sit down and while you flip through the pages just for 5-10 minutes, you kind of disappear into the book. And I thought overall this was just such a great comic book. I think Jeremy Adams, I think the interesting thing that he does so well on his Wally West Flash run, he's done it well on Green Lantern so far, did it great here, is he writes these heroic characters very believably, in terms of there's a humanity in his writing where he writes them where they seem to talk like actual people, not
yeah,
just like just what the comic book hero would say kind of thing. And
yeah.
he just does such a good job with dialogue, the way that things are built together throughout the story. I've always enjoyed his comics for that. This comic, I think Will Conrad's art to me was the real standout in this. It was great in the Free Comic Book Day issue, but just kind of some of the dynamic action sequences and things that he showed. And again, what stands out to me so much when you read a comic like this, every piece of that page is being used. There's no lazy pages where it's Flash's face with an all white background or an all black background or anything like that. There's a lot of detail in the background. The action scenes are very dynamic. I mean, you get this whole full page thing
That
here, just so much detail in every
that
single
panel,
panel.
that panel you just showed. I mean, look at the ink work, the inking.
Yep.
It's the full package. It reminds me of Conan. It's the full
Yep.
package with great pencils, great inks, great colors, good storytelling. It's got everything. Look at this little blast from the past. Like he's bounced around publishers. How about he went to Whitman for a while in the 80s? I remember reading these as a kid. But if he's not fighting dinosaurs or Ming, you could always put him against a shark or something with tentacles always is good. But it's just good fun, right? It's good
Well, I
classic
think
comic
the other
fun.
thing, and this is where I think publishers like Mad Cave, and we've seen this with Titan with Conan. Cool thing they did in this, right? You and I loved this Free Comic Book Day issue.
It was
But
awesome.
this picks up directly off of this because this really acted like a zero, but almost like a number one issue. Cool thing they did on this front page on here, there's a QR code that you can actually use, and you can download a free digital copy of the zero issue. So that if you missed this, you can get the issue for free on your phone and read through it to catch you up. And again,
Somebody's
just a
marketing
brilliant
team.
idea. And it's
Yeah,
one of those things where Marvel or DC would have just reprinted this and charged $4.99 2 months later. Instead,
Yeah.
they're like, you know what? We hope the people who got Free Comic Book Day enjoyed it. If you missed it, we don't want you to be lost. Here's number one and a code to get the zero issue. And it's just stuff where I think these publishers are using the digital piece of things along with the print stuff to really reward their readers. And so I think it makes for a great overall experience as a comic book reader. I think from a
And
story standpoint, it
don't
was
forget
really, really well done.
the little
Yep.
table in the back, right? That
Giving you
tells
the
you
schedule for
all,
release, all that stuff. Absolutely.
right.
No, it absolutely stood out to me. I think the art by Will Conrad on every page was fantastic. Really sets up an interesting story. Kind of pits Flash is, Flash in the Free Comic Book Day made a rather large mistake that had some grave consequences, and so that's kind of largely what we pick up with this story. It puts things in a little bit of a different place, and looks like him and Dale are kind of having some major issues based on what's showing in the book. And again, I think
Right.
one of the things that's really cool is it doesn't feel like any of the characters are being completely written out of context. It feels like there's some storytelling that Jeremy Adams is going to be able to do. And what I really liked about it is, look, as a number one issue, the number one goal that I think everybody should have in a comic book is what's the long term story pitch. Right. I think what number one issues where Marvel and DC have struggled in the last couple of years is it kind of feels like a number one issue is just a large, oversized, overpriced comic book that doesn't really have something to hook you on. What I loved about this is this set the table for what largely this run is going to be concerning. And as a fan, that gets you invested. You're like, man, I want to see how this happens. And you can tell there's some long-term storytelling pieces that seem to be. And that's what
Oh
stood
yeah,
out to me with Conan when that released. And I think this similarly did a great job where you can see, like, man, there's a lot of story potential they could mine out of this.
absolutely. Is such a great character. I'm glad that Mad Cave is putting a lot of effort into it. And like we've always said for these indies, when they get these properties like this, it's a big deal for them. Like with the big two, like they just inherited these, 8-decade old iconic characters, and sometimes it feels like they don't have the respect for them. Not always,
Yeah,
but
no, it
sometimes.
feels like they take them for granted. And you can tell in this comic book that they genuinely seem to be excited to be writing Flash Gordon stories. Whereas
Yeah,
a lot of times it kind of seems in the big two, like, oh man, I gotta write another Batman comic, or oh, I gotta write another Wolverine
it
story or a
does
Deadpool
feel
story.
like that at times. Absolutely.
And Flash Gordon in this one, for at least for the start, it was a great adventure. You could tell they're having fun, seem to have some long term plans. And I got to say, Jeremy Adams to me, every time I read him, his Flash, his Green Lantern, and certainly this, he seems to be one of the better upcoming writers. And that he is now a name out there that I think if you told me, hey, Jeremy Adams is on a book, it probably becomes where like I'm automatically at least picking up the first few issues because
Yeah,
he's kind of earned that. He just does a great job of writing characters, fun, engaging, dynamic stories that do what this medium should do. It's nothing and then there's nothing wrong with trying to write books that you can relate to. But I think the truly great writers are those guys who can write the characters and make you escape for a little bit. And this book certainly accomplished that.
I know. And just for those who aren't maybe familiar with Flash Gordon, it's just a great story. You can do so much with the character, but it's just fun. He's the hero. He gets put in these, science fiction adventures, and he has the heroine to save. He has to save the planet. If you haven't seen the movie or if you're not familiar with this character, he is just really, really a great character. And for a little tidbit of trivia for those of you out there, um, the guy, George Lucas, when he was getting ready to, think about writing a script and a movie, he tried to get the rights to Flash Gordon back in the early 70s. That was going to be his first project. And of course, he couldn't get them. But you can tell he was a big Flash Gordon fan, and that's where his imagination was going. The hero saves the day, saves the universe, saves the planet, saves the girl, rescues the princess. You can't go wrong with a good story like that, and that's what they're bringing here. I mean, this is going to be an awesome book. I can tell already, And if you're not familiar with Flash Gordon, give it a try. He's a great classic, timeless hero. And when I was a kid looking, chasing down Flash comics, Barry Allen comics, I
Mhm.
would go to the comic shop. If they didn't have Flash Gordon, guess what section of the box I'd be looking in? If they
Right
didn't
there.
have Flash, Flash Gordon was right next, and right next to Flash, I'd pull out and I'd be, oh, this looks cool. I'll check this out. That's how I picked up a lot of these Flash Gordon comics, was digging through the bins looking for Barry Allen Flash, and
Ended up with those.
yeah,
No, it's a great example of sometimes you don't need to overthink it. Tell a science fiction story with a hero we can follow and care about. You don't
yeah,
need to reinvent the wheel all the time. And that's what I loved about this comic. It's just, hey, you want a cool sci-fi adventure story? Here it is. And I like that mostly they just looked at it and went, we're just gonna tell a fun story and hope the audience goes with it. I hope they do. Would definitely recommend checking this out. Try to go to your local comic shop if you can. I think a lot of they should hopefully be able to pick you up a copy of it, or I'm sure that Mad Cave at some point might do a reprint or something like that. But definitely worth checking out. We are hopeful this will be the next great indie comic. We love Conan. Conan's fantastic. We are both wanting another great comic that we can
yeah.
anticipate every single month. And I'll say for the first issue, it definitely is something I'll be picking up going forward. And hopefully you guys can check it out as well. Let us know what you guys think below. Did you guys get a chance to check out Flash Gordon #1? Let us know your thoughts as always, folks. Hope you have a great weekend. Hope you have a blessed day, and we'll catch you in our next video.
Thanks, everybody.